out what's going on in your community and around the world at SBS African website. You can read all of our stories in your language, listen to our audio highlights, comment, share, rate and subscribe to news you want. Go to sbs.com.au/African.
I've been in sales for quite a number of years, but the idea came from many sources. Part of the motivation for me to write this book was because one thing I migrated twice.
Yeah.
First time was in South Africa, and then the other time to Australia. When it comes to settling down, I found that the problems of settling down in Australia were actually mirroring those in South Africa. And that sort of prompted me to think, wow, look, these things need to be captured in a book. I also realized that is probably why many migrants really don't settle very well, and in many cases they settle down for what is less than they are capable of, and they give up, and some even return home. So I thought if I capture these things on pen and paper and make them into a book, that would be great, even for the salespeople.
It's a book about helping people in their search for work and overcoming the hurdles of passing the gatekeeper to get an interview and things like that. Tell us a little bit more about that.
In summary, in one sentence, I would call the Weather-Proof Salesman as the discovery of the Western culture through the eye of a migrant. To me, it's a story of resilience, determination, human patience. All that is embodied there is, to a good extent, my life work experiences and how I've managed to cope through all those years that I've been a migrant, highlighting some of those, you would call some of the issues that I came across, the mistakes probably that I've done, and highlighting that as a new migrant, you might want to read the book and not have to do the same mistakes, reinventing the wheel. It is a book that is out there to help. New arrivals. Yes.
What kind of hurdles do you meet? Because one of the first chapters I read about cultural prisms. What's that?
We all look at the world through our prisms, and culture really embodies all those things that we've been taught, where we live, the knowledge that has been passed from generations. And when we view other people in the world, we are actually looking at them through our cultures. I would be looking at you through my African prisms. I will interpret what you see and what I see in my own culture. Therefore, the cartoon you probably saw is looking at a man that is a penguin in this case. It actually goes to see a psychologist.
Yeah.
And the psychologist is saying, look, I suspect the reason why you think you're a penguin can be traced to your parents. Now, and this is a bit absurd because if the psychologist actually knows it is a penguin, he should be forthright and say, you are a penguin. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
But he says, we are suspecting you're a penguin. So there's a problem there already. But the other bigger problem is the penguin took himself or herself to see the psychologist.
To ask what it is,
To ask what it is. And that happens to us when we migrate. We find we are bombarded by so many things and we sort of lose track of who we are. And instead of rushing to ask other people what we are, we need to sort of listen down and to ourselves and say, this is actually what I am, and this is what I'm good at. Yeah.
Your book is peppered with a lot of humor.
Yep.
A lot of cartoons. This makes reading very, very interesting. When you're flipping through the pages, you see a cartoon and you just stop and want to find out what that cartoon is about.
As I said in the introduction, let me underline the word patience, because many times when we come to a new country, we want things to happen quick. To me, from Africa, the West is the promised land. This is where you want things to happen quickly. But when you arrive here, they don't happen that quickly. So you need patience. You also need humor when things are not happening the right way. And that is why there are cartoons in all this. The other thing that I wanted to underline is the discovery, the word discovery, because back in the third world countries, when you look at the magazines and when you watch movies, you see the glossy part of every Western country. But when you land here, it is a different thing. And the book says, look, you need to look at it now from a different perspective. You need to settle through the cultural shock, and you need to see things in a different perspective for you to cope with what is happening to you.
You say that we just go straight into the book. You say that selling drugs is the Rolls Royce in the sales profession.
Yep.
Why is that?
I have done many sort of sales before, and most of these sales were, for example, I started with agrochemical sales, that is back in Kenya. I've sold plants, I've sold fast-moving consumer goods, I've sold IT products, and now I'm selling medicines that save lives, so that is pharmaceuticals. And when I compare all those different sales jobs that I've done, I say, look, this is really ultimately where one would want to be. This is, as for me, this is where I would want to be, because I'm discussing issues and clinical studies with above average intellectuals. These are doctors. And therefore, I think when you get to that level where you're looking at really saving lives, to me, that is the Rolls Royce.
one of the fun chapters that I saw was the gatekeeper, going past the gatekeeper.
Getting past the gatekeeper, yeah.
Give us some of the tips in this profession.
Gatekeepers are there in every industry, and when I say gatekeepers, really, it's not a derogatory. I'm looking at the people who are responsible for making things happen. You know, the people that keep the diary.
Yeah.
And these are very important people, no matter who you are, whether you're the general manager of another salesperson. The person that keeps the diary really arranges what is happening in your day. They are important because you need, number one, to recognize them not as the customer that you're going to see, but you need to recognize them as an important component of that customer. So you need to deal with them in the same way, I would say, in the same way that you would be dealing with the main customer. We know that there's a professional relationship between the receptionists, the secretaries, with their bosses, or whichever bosses. And whatever transpires between you and the secretary or the receptionist, and this is what I'm referring to as the gatekeeper, really gets transmitted even faster to the main person that you'd actually do it. So if you come in across as a rude person, obviously the man behind the desk will realize, Mutu is a rude rep. He's not a good man. And this is where I take the view that they need to be treated with respect, because number one, probably in the sales profession, pharmaceuticals, they are dealing with a lot of things, not just simply what we are seeing, but there's a backlog of other things they have to deal with. And one of these being patience, who I reckon some of them are very impatient.
Patient and impatient.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a big challenge.
Yeah.
And once you go past the gatekeeper, well, there's two approaches that you really gave very well.
Mm-hmm.
The OTC
Yep.
and the F2F. Explain to us what's the difference between those two.
The OTC really refers to the over-the-counter. In this case, we are talking about a medical representative talking to the doctor.
Yeah.
And over-the-counter is when the doctor is really busy, so he may not take you, or she may not take you in her room, to have a 5-minute chat. So the over-the-counter really is when you stand at the counter and you have to give your message to this particular doctor.
That's when they don't want to see you, they just want to get rid of you.
No, they want to see you actually. That's why they're stopping for the 1 minute.
Yeah.
But you have, in this case, to be quite concise and to the point of what you want to tell them.
Yeah.
Now, that is over-the-counter. I've detailed in the book that there are do's and don'ts of the over-the-counter. For example, when it is an over-the-counter, don't try and extend it more than the 1-2 minutes. Otherwise, you are really getting into their nerves. The other thing I call the F2F, which is the face-to-face call. This is when you get the opportunity now of sitting down with the doctor behind the desk without the view of the patients and the receptionist. And here you talk more clinical information. They want to see clinical information. They want to see proof that is been published. We are not talking about hearsay or selling this and selling that.
You've got a technique there you call knitting.
Yep.
What's this knitting thing in sales?
You know the crochet, the way the people do crochet. And when they're knitting, like for a small baby, a pullover or something, or a mat, they start from the center. This is where I sort of take the concept.
Okay.
They start from the center and knit around.
Yeah.
Now, I've also taken that concept from the spider web. When they start doing the web, they actually start from the center.
And keep widening.
They make the structures and then start from the center and then weave around the whole structure. And if you watch them, you actually get sort of flabbergasted. So in terms of dealing with customers, I think it is very important to realize patiently things are not going to happen in a flick of a second. Yeah. So do your structures, do your planning, and then patiently knit from the center and build relationship all around your territory, one customer at a time. And no matter how long it takes, you'll get there. These customers will respect you because you got the time for them. You come and see them and you deliver the goods. That is what any customer would value more.
Knitting.
Yeah.
Other tips?
In the same knitting, I said, when you plan to do all these, sometimes things fall through. They don't work the same way as you plan. Yeah. Don't fret. Don't think the world is collapsing. If you decided to see this number of customers and 2 of them or 3 of them, the first ones have turned you down, they're chipping away at your ego is dented, just brush yourself, wake up again, reaffirm yourself that you are still very good, and move on to the next customers. Keep on knitting. I've called that concept, I call it the self-rejuvenation, because there's so much rejection these days. A sales rep must be able to self-rejuvenate themselves, continue and see the next customer without any traces of the previous fault.
Rejection. We've covered a lot about your book.
Generally, I wanted to thank the listeners. If they are thinking they would want to read further about the Weather-Proof Salesman, in my website is www.theweather-proof salesman or in one word.com. There is a download button there at the bottom, and if they click on that, they'll be able to download a free chapter. When they read the e-chapter, they'll be able to actually ascertain whether they would be interested in that book. And there's also some place there where they can put comments and be able to correspond with me. We also have a Facebook site there, so where they can click and, like the Facebook site or the Twitter as well is all there. That is one thing for those who want to read something about the book. Others that have read the book, I would encourage them to log on to Amazon.com and give the book a rating and comments as well. I'll value your comments, because these comments will help me sort of improve in my either second edition, or when I write something else I would want.
No, we need you to write something else. Your writing is really entertaining, and you go straight to the point. There's no beating around the bush. It's really very, very, very well written, and I hope this is not your last book.
In terms of writing another book, I already have the materials. It's really the time to put
it together. Where, besides Amazon and the online channels, are there any bookshops, specialized bookshops that one can go and get a copy?
You can get a copy from all the bookstores in Australia, UK, Canada, US. Also, as you say, from Amazon.com. You can also get book directly from the publisher. If you go to the website, you'll see my website, the www.theweatherproofsalesman.com. You'll see a link there. You buy from the publisher. You click on that one. It will take you straight to the publisher book poll. If a reader wants another signed copy, there's also a link there where they can communicate with me, and I'll be able to get them to get a book and sign it for them and post it to them. The other thing is an ebook. If they want an ebook, they can still write to me and they will download the ebook.
At least 10% of the proceeds from the sale of this book will go towards feeding a hungry African child.
Absolutely.